Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our weekly media briefing and public health update with Montgomery County Executive Marc Elrich. I'm Lorna Virgili, Hispanic Public Information Officer, and joining us today is Dr. Nina Ashford, the Chief of Public Health Services for Montgomery County, as well as Dr. James Bridgers, who is the Director of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Earl Stoddard, Assistant Chief Administrative Officer, and our guest today, it's Maryland Secretary of Labor, Portia Wu. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Mr. County Executive, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us again today. And even though it's a little later in the week than usual and a little earlier in the day, we continue to see real consequences from Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, on the people who live and work in Montgomery County, and frankly, on the people of the nation. This is not only going to be a Montgomery County hit, this is a national hit. Many of you know multiple executive orders and statements are threatening the loss of thousands of federal jobs and vital services. There have been reports that the White House is preparing an executive order to fire thousands of federal Department of Health and Human Service employees. If true, this would be an attack on the people and institutions that protect the health and advanced medical research. HHS has a large presence here in Montgomery County, including the FDA and NIH, two of the largest federal employers in our county. The work they do affects everything from drug approvals to cutting-edge medical research. The U.S. Agency for International Development has been shut down by DOGE, affecting nonprofits here and around the world, and affecting people around the world. And we're talking about people who are going to get cut off from medical treatments, from food supplies, from necessary improvements to local communities that help make them more sustainable and more survivable. All these things are going to get wiped out. I have to say, what's especially distressing about all this, it's one thing if somebody was going in and saying, we want to make things more efficient. That would be great. If they told me they were going to look at, federal contracting and how cumbersome and complex those contracts are, and is there a better way to do it, I would also say great. What's happening now has nothing to do with somebody doing an analysis of what the programs are and how they serve people. They're just simply looking at the programs, and if any program has anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion, which put differently in the American context, means dealing with the effects of systemic racism, poverty, the fact that women were excluded from schools and business opportunities, and the Black community faced, similar discrimination and worse for, hundreds of years. Anything you do to try to fix things and raise people up is going to be cut out. Last night, I was alerted by Rockville Mayor Ashton that there's a fun group out there that's created something called the DEI watch list. And it's just a bunch of racists who basically are targeting for identification members of the federal government who had any kind of DEI exposure or take leadership in DEI. We've heard reports, and I've heard personally from somebody in one of the federal departments whose crime that is getting her fired is that she took a class in diversity. And for that reason, she's unqualified to work for the federal government. It has nothing to do with the job she does, has nothing to do with what they provide to communities around this country. It is simply the fact that you got educated in diversity. That's a crime that makes it so you can't work for the federal government. This is not an efficiency rampage. This is a rampage against the foundation of our government, and it's really disturbing. This isn't just about one department or one agency. There are 77,550 federal employees who live in Montgomery County, and 48,433 federal jobs are based here. That's a massive part of our local economy. Just yesterday, the courts ruled in favor of the federal employee buyout program. 5 federal working unions sued the Trump administration, over the threat of mass firings. The news is fluid from day to day, but the one consistent theme is chaos. And the sad reality is these decisions are going to hurt our region and our state harder than most places in the country. It's not fair to just the federal employees at risk. contractors who support government operations here, NGOs that rely on USAID for funding, and small businesses, from restaurants to dry cleaners, are all going to be caught in the ripple effects. When the county had an analysis done for us early on in my administration, they looked back on how jobs had shrunk in the county and where this began, and what they identified was going back to the Great Recession that we had, when there was a major drop in federal funding to NIH, and that drop rippled through the world that supports the work that NIH does, to the effect of drastically reducing the number of people working, and it has been hard to recover, and the effects were pretty widespread. That's one reason we've invited Maryland Secretary of Labor Portia Wu to join me in the meeting this week. The economic damage from this disruption impacts our county and state is almost certain to be far greater than just the number of people laid off. Families are being put in impossible positions. Right now, we're all focused on supporting federal employees, contractors, and others impacted by these changes at the federal level. Thank you for joining me today, Secretary Wu, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, County Exec, and it's a pleasure to be here, everyone. Obviously this has huge impacts for Maryland, but also as a Montgomery County resident and constituent, and someone whose parents spent their careers in federal service, and I have many family members in federal service here in Maryland. I understand this is a scary time for everyone. I just want to reiterate, of course, the state is here to serve Marylanders. We want to support them, working with our partners at the county and local level. It's critical that we serve all of our residents as they're facing these really difficult, uncertain times. I just wanted to underscore a couple of things that the county executive said and provide a little bit more information for folks on the call. Maryland, of course, has the second highest concentration of federal employees of any jurisdiction in the country, second only to Washington, D.C. You've already seen some of the numbers around Montgomery County specifically. We know, based on, again, these are estimates, we don't have the exact OPM payrolls, but the averages in recent years are that over 300,000 Marylanders are employed in civilian positions in the federal government. That doesn't mean the jobs are here, but they live here in our state. So all of this is impacting them. And we know there are over 160,000 federal civilian jobs actually located here in the state across more than 50 federal agencies. There's a heavy concentration of those in defense, and then right after that in human services. And here in Montgomery County, of course, we know we have very large presences from NIH, FDA, NIST, and some of the military treatment facilities, including Walter Reed. I also wanted to touch on something the county exec mentioned, which is the ripple effect, right? It's not just federal jobs. It's also federal contractors. Over 225,000 jobs in Maryland, if you look at 2023 data, are supported by federal contract dollars. And of course, that's the kind of center of the bullseye. There are grants, there are other things that are also impacted by federal spending. Our estimates from the last year we have the available data, which is 2023, is they were about $11 billion in federal government contract dollars spent in Montgomery County. So it's a huge impact on federal contracting and for federal workers. I want to touch on some of the resources that we have at Maryland Department of Labor. We know a lot of people will be impacted by the changes that are happening, not only government employees, contractors, but also others. So we have a dedicated resource page. I'd like to direct you to that. That's labor.maryland.gov/federal workers. That provides information about unemployment insurance benefits and reemployment support. We have services and, of course, work very closely with our county partners and WorkSource Montgomery to make sure that people have connections to be able to find jobs and file for unemployment insurance. I do want to underscore that individuals should be filing at the place where their duty station is. This can be confusing for some people. If they live in one jurisdiction or work in another, they should file in the state or jurisdiction where they work. Of course, we'll provide that help, but we don't want to delay things. Individuals in Maryland who work in Maryland who are eligible for unemployment insurance are eligible for up to $430 a week in weekly benefits. That's pre-tax. They can file on our website or through a phone line. The number is 667-207-6520, we'll send that around so you have it. And I just want to leave with, we have, of course, our American Job Centers across the state and here in Montgomery County. We have a professional outplacement assistance center that focuses on individuals with that may be a lot of federal government employees with administration or other jobs. And we are holding a virtual workshop every week specifically to support former feds, and contractors. It's every Wednesday from 9 to noon. And again, people can email that. We'll share around the information to sign up for the workshop. We are already seeing people signing up for that, looking to get the information, and we want to provide that support. Thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Secretary. Members of the media, we're going to open it up for questions right now. For the Secretary, I see Dana Munro from the Washington Post. Good morning. Go ahead.
Morning. Sorry, my question wasn't for the Secretary, it was for the county exec. I can.
Okay, either.
Is that okay? Oh.
Regarding this topic, go ahead. If it's regarding this topic, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
It is not regarding this topic.
Okay, so we can wait afterward.
You can wait.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Jeannie Bixby, Local 360. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning, Lorna, and nice to hear from you, Secretary. I apologize if my sound's a little weird. I am quite literally en route to Annapolis for some of the committee hearings. You shared that there were some really great resources for our federal workers here in Montgomery County across the state. Are you concerned about the state's capacity to provide these resources for the vast number of, you said thousands of federal workers that could be affected? How are you preparing and managing that?
Thank you for the question. Of course, we've seen that this could be coming for some time. So we have already started gearing up to make sure we have additional resources here at the state level. We're fortunate actually that Maryland's economy has been quite strong in many ways. So we do still have a lot of open positions in the state, but we are definitely going to be calling on our colleagues at the job centers around the state at the local level. But we are preparing. We have been preparing. We are looking at additional options to make sure we have the capacity to answer questions and support people.
Great, thank you. And just to follow up, so a suggestion might be to try to see if some of these folks would qualify for some of these positions at the state level that you're looking to fill.
Absolutely. I mean, we still do have a lot of positions open in state and county government. These are people with excellent qualifications and very strong backgrounds. And we will be working, we've already been in touch with some other counties on this as well, about how can we make sure that people are aware of the job opportunities right here in their neighborhoods.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeannie. Danny Nguyen, remind me, you're with Washington Post?
No, I actually moved to Politico. Hey, how's it going?
How do you think?
I know. Yeah, we'll need to catch up. But I have two questions. So thanks, I guess, both for Marc and Portia, but the federal workers website was helpful, but I think I'm wondering, besides the workshop, what's new? What's like the new infrastructure to support these federal workers that are probably going to be laid off soon?
So I would say, we have an existing infrastructure. Like we have had, major recessions before. Like it's not something we have to think of in whole cloth. We are going to rely on those job centers and on unemployment insurance. Those systems already exist. We are definitely beefing up. However, again, like I said, we're having this workshop every week. We'll see what the demand is. It hasn't been very high yet, but we obviously are ready to pivot to address the needs that we're seeing from workers.
Got it. And I mean, out of curiosity, what have you guys had any conversations with the Trump administration, and if so, what have those looked like?
I can't speak to that. Obviously, but I have to direct that one to the governor's team. We know that, with a lot of the agencies, we each have our own connections, and in many of the agencies, they just haven't been in a position yet to really speak directly with states.
Got it. Sounds good.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Danny. Kate Ryan, WTOP. Good morning, Kate. There you are.
There we go. Thank you so much. I did have a question about for the Labor Secretary. What about, and someone mentioned the capacity to access benefits, to access help. I know that during COVID, people complained of very long waits. They couldn't get answers. They felt confused. And I know that right now there's a lot of confusion. How are you equipped to deal with that? And again, well, I'll ask that first, and then I have a follow-up.
Okay, thank you. You know, I wasn't here during COVID, but I know, frankly, our agency and many agencies were overwhelmed. It was a very difficult time. Because we saw this coming, we have been gearing up. We've been hiring additional staff. We are also trying to hire more staff who are able to answer questions and address people's issues. One of the things that had happened before is we had a lot of contracts to answer the phones, but people couldn't resolve people's unemployment insurance problems or claims. So we have been building that staff up. Obviously, it is going to be a challenge. I do think, our agency also addressed the Francis Scott Key Bridge response. So fortunately, we have a team that is used to sort of fast emergency response. And I think that helped us learn a lot of things and develop a lot of procedures that will stand us in good stead this time around. But I don't want to sugarcoat it. It could be very challenging depending on the volume. We are planning for all sorts of different scenarios.
Gotcha. And then I don't know if you have this information yet. Among the people who have reached out to the state for assistance, do you know if these are the people who agreed to the deferred resignation, or are they kind of checking out, what might be available if they are laid off?
We do not know if they are, individuals who decided to participate in the deferred resignation. I know what you know about the public numbers, and they seem small overall in the overall federal workforce, but we do not collect that information. At this point, the people reaching out, I think, are, one, seeking information, trying to see what their options are and brush up their resumes. We have not yet seen surges in terms of unemployment insurance applications. We are starting to see some federal contractor workers who are being laid off and coming in, but I think it's early days yet. We are tracking this data on a daily basis, so we should know more in the coming weeks and months.
Gotcha. And last question, I promise. I want to go over the figures you said about federal workers in Maryland. Is it 300,000 statewide and 160,000 in Montgomery County?
Let me walk through that again, actually, because I know the county executive shared some numbers on Montgomery County. So there are both people who live in Maryland and work in federal government, and that could be in Maryland, DC, Virginia, wherever. That's it's actually over 325,000. If you look at the 5-year averages, it's been about that level. They live in Maryland. 160,000 are the federal civilian jobs located in Maryland. So basically, like, your duty station is in Maryland. And again, that's only civilian. It doesn't include all of the defense. And it doesn't include the national security agencies, because we don't, that data isn't shared out there in the same way. Those are the numbers. I know the county exec also shared some numbers about Montgomery County. And I don't know if he wants to repeat those. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. County Executive?
Yes.
So again, the numbers in Montgomery County?
Let me go back to where they were.
I appreciate it, and then I'll stop.
Yeah.
Promise.
Well, I'm finding 77,550 federal employees live here, 48,433 federal jobs based here. That was our best ability to collect that data.
Thank you so much.
I will say, on your point about retirement, who's not working, one of the great pieces of speculation out there right now is, how heavily are the 48,000 jobs impacted by people who are going to retire anyway this year and just decided to get out now and take the extra money or whatever is coming with it, rather than, running the clock out and what would be probably a pretty miserable job right now. So you may have people who are going to retire early, or just simply retiring when they can. So it may not be, I don't think this is at all a true reflection of what happens when he starts laying people off, because when they get into the laying off bit of this, it's going to be massive.
Got it. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Kate. Judith Hirth, the Greater Olney News. Good morning, Judy.
Good morning. Secretary Wu, I am wondering, in addition to the federal workers themselves, what about the Department of Labor? And I'm sure you get contracts and grants for programs that you do. Is that correct? And if so, is that going to further trickle down to the people in the state, impacting them even further than losing their jobs?
Well, I think there are a couple of questions embedded there. First of all, the federal funding freezes or potential cuts. I mean, there's active litigation going on there. And we know, of course, Congress will need to take action soon to avert a federal shutdown. So there are a lot of questions there. Obviously, stopping funding has a major effect for state agencies. The State Department of Budget and Management is closely monitoring that and analyzing, and all of our state agencies have been in the process of preparing and analyzing what impacts there could be if federal funding is reduced or stopped. It's very hard to tell right now exactly how that's going to play out, but we need to be prepared for every contingency. And of course, our greatest concern is how those stoppages could impact services that we are providing to people in the state. These services that I mentioned, employment counseling, unemployment insurance, we are reimbursed. Those are federally funded programs. So we need to make sure that we still have those federal funds to be able to serve Marylanders on the ground.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Dana, I see your hand up again. You have a question for the secretary?
No, sorry, it's not for the secretary. I just thought everyone else's had
Okay,
passed.
let us wrap this up because she might need to go. And
Go ahead.
And then we'll take your question related to the topics. Members of the media, any more questions for Secretary Wu this morning? No more questions? Going once? Twice? Okay, Ryan again.
You knew I'd come in under the wire.
Go ahead.
Secretary, I did have a question. The judge's ruling in Boston on the ability, I think he said the union members had no standing in preventing the layoffs. I may be scrambling this. How does that factor into the services you're trying to provide? Does it boost the numbers, or do you suspect you'll see more people sign up for assistance?
I know our attorneys would not want me to speak to the ruling itself, but I can say, look, it's still a very uncertain time. We know there are going to be many more chapters in this story as it's written. We're still plowing ahead and just focusing on providing the services to Marylanders. We know a lot of people will be impacted, whether you're a contractor, whether you're an employee, whether you're a grantee, whether there's an indirect impact on you. Honestly, to us, at some level, we're trying to do the analysis so we can prepare, but it doesn't really matter because we have to serve everyone who's out of a job or looking for a better job. So that is our focus, is to be ready for that, regardless of how that path leads them to us. That's what we want to do is be ready for that. I think it's too soon to say exactly what the impact of that decision is at this point.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Kate, I just want to say, my understanding from reading articles about this is the judge found the unions didn't have standing. In other words, the union's not a person, so this didn't affect the union, it affected people, and they didn't have individual people on this lawsuit. And this is unfortunately not unusual. There are a number of times that, that recently where lawsuits have not been allowed because, say, an environmental group takes up a challenge in about a specific project or a specific law in a specific place, and rather than something generic, and judges find that nobody who's affected by this is on the lawsuit, and then they don't allow the lawsuit. So the issue of standing is not new, and I was a little surprised that they didn't attach some names or people to the lawsuit, so the judge wanted to be able to make a finding that they didn't have standing. But that's just like my understanding of what I had read last night and a little bit this morning.
Got it.
Either way, it's not good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Members of the media, any more questions for the secretary this morning? No more questions? Secretary Wu, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We do know you're busy and you need to depart, so Thanks for
Thanks.
stopping by.
And thank you. I really appreciate your being here. So this news is going to be fluid from day to day, but the one constant thing is chaos around here. I want to thank everybody again, and appreciate the Secretary taking time out of her schedule to join us. Montgomery County is working closely with the state, union partners, nonprofit organizations, and our congressional delegation to provide help. The county's help, obviously, is going to be very limited. Our budget is not flush with lots of funds to do things we had not anticipated we'd ever have to do. We've added a link to resources on the federal for people in the federal workforce on the county's homepage. Anyone can access these links by visiting montgomerycountymd.gov and clicking on federal worker resources. I also want to thank Representatives Raskin and Senators Van Hollen and Senator Alsobrooke for hosting helpful telephone town halls this week for the residents and families impacted. We are scheduling a town hall coming up, and so stay tuned for more information on what Montgomery is going to do, but it's soon. We're fortunate that amidst the chaos and confusion of all these decisions, we have a strong and experienced congressional delegation who's fighting for us. These changes are taking their toll on many people. For those in need of mental health support, you can call our crisis center at 240-777-4000, or you can use the National Crisis Line 988 by phone, text, or chat. So please take advantage of these resources. As we see more federal workers returning to the office, it's no surprise that traffic is already increasing on our highways and local roads. And if you've noticed longer commutes this week, you're not alone. I've noticed them. That's why I want to encourage everyone to consider taking public transit, whether it's ride-on, Metrorail, Metrobus, or even carpooling. It's not just about the avoiding traffic and the stress of driving, but it's one of the best things we can do for the environment. For information on MC.dot programs and services, including downloading the Ride On Trip Planner app, visit montgomerycountymd.gov/MCDOT. Public transit can be a great way to get to work, so before you get stuck in gridlock, think about taking the train, bus, or sharing a ride. And since we just mentioned traffic concerns, one of our biggest impediments for alleviating traffic concerns is the lack of infrastructure funding in Montgomery County. This is a long-standing problem. This is nothing new. And that's why I'm vetoing Council Bill 2224, taxation, collection of development impact taxes, because it defers the collection of revenues from impact taxes, which are specifically intended to pay for infrastructure that development requires, schools, roads, sidewalks, and transit. But this delay will result in a loss of revenues in the early years of the capital improvement program and will require reductions or delays to critical projects in the county. It is frustrating, very frustrating, because the council knows that while we may escape the brunt of retirements or displacements in the federal workforce in this tax year, because people's taxes that we're counting on were up till December 31st of 2024, the coming year is going to have the decreased taxes from people who are laid off and don't get jobs. And that's a serious impact. And it's going to, as we know, we've said repeatedly, it's going to have impacts throughout the economy. And anything that impacts the economy negatively is likely to have an impact on, funding county projects. So the last thing we need to do was to cut impact taxes again and now delay them for another year from collecting them. So when we put our budget together, we'd anticipated the level of impact taxes that we're not going to be able to get. And that's going to be the council going to have unpleasant choices. In just the past decade, impact tax collections have dropped over 74%, from nearly $60 million in 2014 to just $15.6 million in 2024. That's money, folks, that's been shifted onto your backs from being in the developer's responsibilities. That's a $45 million loss in funding for schools and transportation. And now this bill would delay the collection of another $27.8 million over the next 6 years without a plan to replace it. That's also especially aggravating since the council's agreed and the planning board is going to work with everybody to try to come up with an alternative taxing system. Hopefully if we did this right, we could get this in place in the coming year. There would be no need for impact taxes. The whole point of changing our tax structure regarding how we treat commercial development is to reduce the cost of development on developers who carry the burden for all the impacts of their projects, even though people got into the system early, did not have to pay for those things. This makes it fairer, it creates districts which all benefit from the transit improvements. It reduces the total amount of money the developer would have to spend compared to what they have to spend right now, but it also spreads it out over a longer period of time. The reality is simple. If development doesn't pay its fair share, then one of two things happen. Either taxpayers end up footing the bill, or we simply don't build the infrastructure we need, and neither of these outcomes is acceptable. We are already seeing the effects of declining revenue. This year alone, we had to delay, reduce, or eliminate funding for critical projects, including sidewalk and bikeway improvements on Goldsboro Road, Tuckerman Lane and Bradley Boulevard, the Forest Glen Passageway, and school additions of Paint Branch High School, Mill Creek Town Elementary, and Blake High School. That's before the reduction in revenues. I've said many times we should replace impact taxes with the system similar to Northern Virginia. That way developers would contribute to infrastructure. Their costs would be spread over a much longer period of time. They would actually be lower and would spread out over a larger base. It would allow this county to bond on those revenues, which are not able to do on impact taxes. This bill doesn't even fix that problem. And at the same time, it delays funding for already planned projects, which means we're affecting our residents. Benefiting the developer and taking it out on the residents is not something we should be doing here. And until we implement a better system, we cannot support further cuts that weaken our ability to invest in our communities. So I'm going to send over a veto on this one. We have to be able to fund the schools, roads, and transit improvements. If the county overrides my veto, then we'll have to send to the council recommended delays in capital project funding because the loss in revenue would be immediate. It will go into effect for the coming year. I look forward to working with the council to find a solution. These issues are also tied to years of maintaining a flat bond funding level, even as inflation has reduced the buying power of those bonds. We've been stuck at floating $280 million in bonds for 7 or 8 years now. Everybody knows that inflation has gone up. So the project you thought you were going to build in 2019 is going to cost you a lot more when you get around to it in 2026. We do not increase our bond funding even to match inflation. So it's reduced the buying power of those dollars. So we have multiple problems we have to fix, and we need to fix them. Economic development investments on the bright side are paying off. On the Economic Development Fund, I'm excited to let you know that just received news that our new Technology Innovation and Founders Fund is off to an exciting start. 144, you heard that number, 144 early stage companies applied for commercialization grants. Commercialization grants means they're ready to take the work they're doing from the table to the market. That is an impressive number, and it clearly demonstrates that we're addressing a need that a lot of innovators in Montgomery County are working to get their discoveries to market, which will enable them to hire and grow jobs. Investing in programs like these is more important now than ever, given the many uncertainties at the federal level. The fund applications are now under review, and next month we expect to commit the full $10 million allocated to this to help those startups grow right here in Montgomery County. We'll also be providing coaching to those companies to make sure they can succeed. Our team has also been busy with the new jobs program, which by its design will have a much slower implementation period. It requires employees to work in a qualified, high-paid job for at least 6 months before incentives are paid. And the starting point, the bill requires that a company bring on at least 5 employees who make $100,000. Those new employees have to be on the job 6 months. So if you don't hire them all at once on day one, and this bill only passed back in back last May of 2024, it obviously takes time to get that out. We had to write regulations and get this bill put together into regulatory form, but then employers had to learn about it. Then they had to make hiring decisions and then actually hire them. And only after they had them hired could they apply for this. They had to have those people, and then they have to be there for 6 months on the job. So we're about at the point, I think, where we should be able to see more employers taking advantage of it. But the uptake has been a little bit slow. We've also been busy allocating $661,000 for 25 different businesses through our MOVE grants. With 6 more applications in the pipeline, we've earmarked an additional $301,000, bringing our total from $963,000 to $963,000, exceeding the $950 in the budget. MOVE grants are given only to businesses that are signing new leases or expanding in the county, which means these companies are growing, and that means more employees and hopefully more revenues from sales. Funding for these 3 programs, commercialization, jobs, and MOVE grants, is tied to business growth. I'm happy to see the interest in these programs, and we want to ensure that money spent through these grants helps attract, launch, or retain business growth in this county. Economic development takes real work. We're not just throwing money around. We're making targeted investments to support companies that we want to be here, grow here, and create long-term success for our economy. And we have been very focused on making sure the money that we put out in grants goes to companies that pay actually decent wages, because there's no point in bringing jobs here that don't pay sufficient wages and wind up having to rely on counties to support the families that are working here. We have a lot of working poor in this county. People are not poor here because they don't work. They're poor here because they don't get paid properly. We would like to have less of that, and we're focusing this effort on making sure the jobs that come here will help the family sustain itself without relying on the government. We will keep moving forward, and I encourage businesses looking to expand in Montgomery County to take advantage of these programs. Finally, I'd like to remind everyone that next Monday is a federal holiday. Many government services like libraries, MC 311, and senior centers will be closed for President's Day. Ride-On will operate on a holiday schedule. ABS stores, recreation, and aquatic centers will be open regular hours. For a full list of the openings and closures, look for the President's Day press release, which has already been shared with our subscribers and published on our website. I'd like to give the health team and other county leaders any opportunity they want to share any updates before we take the rest of your questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Just want to let everybody know that influenza continues to remain the largest cause of moderate and severe respiratory illness within Montgomery County. With our current weekly total, is higher than any week we've seen in the past 9 years. And this is not just in Montgomery County. This is nationally. We're seeing influenza rates higher than we've seen in the past 9 to 15 years. We're also seeing very high levels of influenza in the wastewater. About 900 people a week are actually being treated and diagnosed with influenza. If you would like to get a flu shot, it is not too late. If you have private insurance, please reach out to your primary care provider or go to a CVS or Walgreens to get your flu vaccine. If you are uninsured or underinsured, you can come to Dennis Avenue Health Center here within Montgomery County to get a flu vaccine. And you can make that appointment by calling 240-777-1050. As always, with any respiratory illness, it's continuing to follow the same preventive measures. Wash your hands. If you're sick, stay home. If you are going to be in crowded places, consider wearing a mask, especially with these high rates of spread. So everybody stay safe out there, and hopefully we will start to see these flu rates coming down soon. Dr. Bridgers?
Good morning, Mr. County Executive and all joining this morning. No additional updates to Dr. Ashford's flu updates and public health updates. The only thing that I would add and re-emphasize is the crisis helpline from HHS with our Crisis Management Center and team. Please share throughout your news reporting that system is available for those individuals who may be experiencing either employment-related challenges, childcare-related challenges, or just mental health challenges in general. Happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you, Dr. Asher and Dr. Bridgers. Dr. Stoddard, do you have any remarks at this point?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I'll actually be in Annapolis this afternoon testifying on behalf of the county executive in support of Senate Bill 0590 and House Bill 0744. These are the negligent, aggressive, and reckless driving enhancement bills that we developed to address the situation involving Sergeant Pat Kep. They were obviously submitted to Annapolis last year. We got some feedback and made some tweaks this year, but we're back in Annapolis seeking some changes to the law that allow us to address repetitive, aggressive driver behavior that makes our roadways far less safe. County Executive talked about our need to invest in infrastructure. That is a continued priority effort. In addition to, we're taking an all a yes and approach to this situation with Vision Zero, where we trying to address the finances of infrastructure change, but also try and get legislative changes and education where appropriate to address driver behavior as well. So this is all part of a concerted effort on behalf of this administration to try and make our roadways safer. So I'll be in Annapolis this afternoon to try and further that along, and hopefully we'll be successful this year. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Stoddard. Members of the media, I just learned that the county executive does have a hard stop at 11 a.m.
I don't have a hard stop.
No hard stop? Okay, great. Thank you. Kate Ryan, WTOP, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask all the doctors, actually. First on the influenza, and I was talking to Sean O'Donnell yesterday, and he said, it's a bad flu year, but is there something else driving those high numbers? Do we have fewer people vaccinating? Do we have people vaccinated later? Or is it, as he said, this is just a new flu and it's bad?
Thanks, Kate, for the question. So it is hard to say definitively at this point, while we are in the middle of respiratory season, why it's higher. One of the leading hypotheses is that we do have lower vaccination rates this year. The CDC sets a target of 70%. We're at about 44%, which is far below that 70%, and we are seeing fewer children vaccinated this year than in previous years. So we definitely think that is one of the drivers. We will have to wait a few months to actually see how the current formulation for this year's flu shot is actually working against the strain. So we don't have enough information yet to be able to definitively say whether this current vaccination for this year was more or less effective. But we do think, as I mentioned, one of the biggest drivers really are those lower vaccination rates.
And do we know among a specific demographic, and I keep going back to this because it was so successful when we had Abuelina reminding us to go and get vaccinated, right? Do we have any indication if there are particular groups that are either opting out or just, didn't get to it, or?
Yeah, I don't have that data readily available to share, Kate, to be able to answer that question, but I'm happy to follow up with you offline to look at the vaccination rates by race and ethnicity.
Great. And then I don't know if Dr. Stoddard left the discussion here, but on his testimony later today, what specifically are in those bills that allows you to really go after aggressive and dangerous drivers? Is he
Yeah, so for obviously negligent, aggressive, and reckless driving are all separate charges, and they involve varying degrees of intent in doing things. But often what they did is they did not typically, many of them didn't have escalators. I mean, you could aggressively drive 2, 3, 4 times and there would be no increased consequence for having done so. And so this aims to, you can typically, prepay a lot of fines where you get a ticket, you prepay it, you never have to go to court, and really there's no other consequence. This essentially says that after the first time where you may prepay, people make mistakes, and I think that's not what we're trying to address here. We're trying to address people who are not learning from their mistakes and really not viewing them as mistakes. They're viewing them as intentional. They're just with wanton disregard, not considering traffic laws or safety or speed in how they drive, and the prepaid fine is insufficient to change that behavior. And so what we're aiming to do is increase the penalties on second and beyond offenses to get them in front of the judiciary so the judiciary can implement measures that are going to result in a behavior change. Because at the end of the day, that's what we're not trying to incarcerate tons of people. We're not trying to, but we need behavior change to keep our roadways safe. No matter how we design our roadways, if people are not utilizing them in the intended way, we're never going to be able to achieve Vision Zero or anything resembling that. And so obviously this is about the balance of letting people, understanding people will make mistakes on occasion, but also that you can't just continue to make the same mistakes over and over again and not learning from those lessons.
Got it. Thank you very much.
I want to add something to that. In the case of Sergeant Kep, who was our officer who got run down by one of these drivers who was a serial violator, we used to taunt police, and because they knew that we do not do high-speed chases here, and he would taunt police and just take off knowing they wouldn't be able to follow him and drive like a lunatic. The problem is he didn't own the cars, so he didn't even get a ticket. The tickets went to his mother, who was the owner of the cars. So she pays a ticket for speeding, and he suffers no consequences whatsoever until he finally gets in trouble because he actually almost kills somebody. So we need stronger laws to hold people responsible. We need the ability, and I think if people understood they were going to be held accountable for this kind of nonsense, they would look at it a little bit differently. But we fully intend to try to get a law that's as enforceable and strong as possible, with penalties that befit somebody who's willing to kill someone for his own personal enjoyment. That doesn't work for me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Mariam Shasad, Montgomery Community Media. Good morning.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you, County Executive. I know you said stay tuned for more information, but the town hall that the county's planning, could you give a little more information? Like, are you modeling it after Raskin's and the senator's telephone town hall?
Basically, what they did in Howard County, trying to make sure we can get people as much information from a variety of sources so they can get a sense of where they can go to get some help.
Thank you. And then separate topic, the plastic bag ban that was passed by the council this week. Just want to ask, are you happy about that? Do you think that's going to be good for us?
Yeah, the bags continue to mount up in the roadways and in the streams, and in my garbage can because, a lot of stuff comes in plastic bags. I'm looking forward to getting rid of them. When I go to the grocery store, I always ask for paper. And I'm glad that these will be largely gone in our environment. I wish some other plastic we could get rid of, like the unnecessary taking commercial mailers. You get these things in your mail, and they used to be on cardboard or a stiffer paper stock. Now they're on plastic too, and it's just like, how much of this stuff do we need to produce, and how many reports do you need to read from scientists about how microplastics are accumulating in our bodies? And between that and PFAS, they definitely believe that these things have health effects, and just continue to let these things be used without regard for the health benefits or the health effects. So it's alarming that, we haven't had a stronger voice from EPA on this. It's doubly alarming that we're not going to have any voice from EPA going forward, apparently, or from HHS, or anybody who regulates health. So we're looking at an environment in which case the people who can make a difference and change this in a more fundamental way actually refuse to act on it. So we'll take what actions we can here to do our part in our community, and I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mariam. Lionel Donovan, WUSA 9. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I just wanted to talk in regards to the deferred resignation buyout. I'm sure everybody has heard a judge has allowed the resignation buyout to go through, given the amount of federal workers living in Montgomery County. I was wondering if the county has anything set up to maybe help some of those federal workers that might be feeling, a bit concerned and anxious about what the future might hold. We know that with these layoffs are very possible for a majority of the federal workforce. And so, yeah, like I said, I was wondering if there was anything that you wanted to say, Executive Elrich, if you wanted to comment on that, also offer any resources to those that might be looking to leave the federal workforce.
When we do this event, we will have all this information out there in terms of what kind of programs we have and we're able to support, as well as directing them to resources at the state level. The state level is going to be the primary support for income. They always are. That's not been the county's role, and we've never created a tax base that would, have the kind of money in an unemployment fund that the state has. So that heavy lifting is going to fall largely on the state. We'll be there to try to provide support, try to provide opportunities for people to move to alternative jobs. And that probably will be, the greatest part of our role. We're working very closely with the state so we can get both funds and programs out in front of people so they can get themselves into new jobs. And always the challenge, one of the challenging things is going to be getting jobs that match the skill levels of the people who are retiring from the federal government or the specialty areas that they have. So you not only have to find the jobs are going to have to fit. So I don't think this is going to be easy.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you, Lionel. Hey, Ryan, again, good morning again.
Good morning. And again, I just want to clarify, Mr. County Executive, you did say you're happy to support the bag ban. I'm assuming that means a signature. When might you sign that bill into law?
As soon as it crosses over.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate. Members of the media, any more questions for the county executive and county officials this morning? No more questions? Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Stay safe.
Thank you all.
Property, starting with the purchase of the first home in 2006, and we started the process of developing